direction. I'm actually going to use science and physics, which I love, and then backtrack to the creation story again. Now, in physics, in superstring physics, in M theory, I'm trying not to get all physics on you. I will use, I'll keep it simple, and we aren't going to have to do any math, I promise. But if you've seen the movie The One with Jet Li, this is the general concept that the math that they have found, that is the only math that creates a unified field theory where gravity and electric and nuclear all come from the same source. That math suggests that there's multiple universes, multiple worlds. And that movie is based off of that concept. The problem with that perspective is it flies in the face of conservation of energy, in that you now have there's 10 dimensions, so you now have 10 Earths, each its own source of gravity. And so it doesn't really work. But if you change it up a little bit and kind of fix those problems with some very simple change, and they teach you that when you watch shows on physics about how there's this membrane, that's what they call it, that separates the dimensions. It's all a load of crap. And there's a reason. And I'm going to explain that. One of the things that I want to share to a good degree is that even science, as a holy institution, as they consider it to be, has a very manipulative kind of underbelly in certain ways that is kind of detrimental. And I need to show that to you. If you take this math and this theory and you change it up a little bit, it also becomes very functional and very spiritual. What you do is you get rid of this membrane, which is like dumb, and you change it to phase angle. That's what separates the dimension. I'll give you a good example. A radio wave, which is 20 meters long, and a visible light wave, both the same thing, which is 7 nanometers long. The radio wave doesn't even know that the light wave exists. At no time are the photons traveling in the same direction at the same time. Your light wave has a very, it goes up and it goes down. Your radio wave goes real slow. Now, the reason that that's important is because it tells you that the separation between this light wave and this light wave is really phase angle. And it works the same way with dimensions, because the matter in one dimension is never going to be in the same place or going in the same direction as matter in the next direction. What this does is allows you to put all of the worlds, all 10 dimensions, and all 10 worlds in the same place, right here. Now, this is actually kind of important. And the reason that physicists in America can't talk like this is because of its implications. If there is another world made of matter, it would actually be a finer matter. You have a bandwidth of light of long radio waves all the way up to gamma rays, which are incredibly tiny. And that's your spectrum. With matter, you have a spectrum too. On your periodic table, you have, if you kick off all of the stuff that we manufacture through nuclear methods, we have have like, I think, 29 original chemicals that are natural, the natural bandwidth of matter. And you start out at the lightest, you go to the heaviest. With the dimensions, you would have the same arrangement, just like a rainbow. And the next dimension up would be lighter. If you take it from that perspective, the next dimension is a finer matter. It exists in exactly the same place. And the matter in that place revolves, interacts with the matter in this place only through fields. They never touch each other. The magnetic, the gravitational, the nuclear, that's the only way they interact. What that means is that around your body, this finer matter is collecting. It's interacting with fields, has its own chemistry, and so all of the dimensions that you exist in, different from the movie The One, are all right here. This has the implications of a ghost. When you start talking supernatural, scientists today are expected to be atheists. So this is kind of a career ender. Because when you die, what happens to that body? That body's still there in that dimension. Of course, we take this one step further, and there's 10 dimensions, right? This implies upwardly 10 bodies, and each one of finer matter, and now we start talking about things like how they interact as fields, and so you have energy centers, and we get to chakras and the Hindu religion, or Buddhism, any one of the number of religions that talk about chakras. Now, the spiritual implications of this is huge, and scientists in America, really, in India, they can probably get away with it, but here, it's really not okay. Eventually, the math for superstring physics would be used to calculate an angle of refractory, and it wouldn't be long, and with a science statement supported by credible people, we would have science that would allow us to take pictures of the other dimensions, and would allow us to prove that they were there. And if you prove life after death, that's a problem. Because in America we worship money. And the instant you prove life after death, that will all basically kind of fall apart, because people will quit worshiping money. They'll change their whole perspective, their whole life. Even people who go to church for the wrong reason are going to start to believe, right? So, really, they can't talk like that. Not in public, anyways. Now, the reason that this is important is because I would like to show, and the reason that this relates to the Bible is that I would like to show how the Bible is actually used to prevent you from finding a very important truth and the lie that's told. In the Word of Now, it talks, God states that He's given you His all, and that you have everything that He has, and that He exists on all of the planes of existence, all of the dimensions. So do you. But the reason this is a problem is because, first of all, I would like to explain to you and give you a definition of exactly what it is, the situation is that you're in, and why this is important. In the Nag Hammadi scripture, the scripture of the beloved, it gives you there's a tree of life. And you go through this tree of life, and you have compassion and empathy and honor and all of these different vows. You get to the top. The whole objective is to bring you to the point that you can heal your soul. Of course, you're not going to find this in the Bible. But the concept that you need to heal your soul, and that's an interesting one, right? What do you mean? When was it injured? How was it injured? So now I'm going to define your soul for you. Your soul is all of those bodies from all of those dimensions. everything that manifests your spirit in a body. That is your soul. It is the vehicle, the learning vehicle that you receive when you are a being in learning and when you are incarnated. Now, how is the soul injured? In Hindu, there is, well, I got to go back a little bit. Your spirit is the child of God, the being created by God, the child of God, the being that is made of the same material. And that actually resides in this body here with this chakra. They call it an astral body, but really it's your spirit. It is in between the top 3 chakras and the bottom 3 chakras. Yeah. All of the information from all 3 bodies has to pass through that body before it can go to the others. Your higher spiritual dimensions passes through there to go to the lower physical dimensions passes there to go to the higher. This is the being that experiences the near-death experience, where people, when they die, they can go to heaven and then they get kicked back here. This is that being. This is your consciousness. This is you. The child of God that resides in the temple of God, which is a multi-dimensional group of bodies. Now, how is the soul injured is an interesting concept. It's an interesting thing. Now, in order at this point, at most people, in order to experience any one of these bodies or dimensions, they actually have to move their consciousness to that level. Usually you do it during dreams or sleep. It'd probably freak you out if you didn't. You couldn't accept it mentally. But in Hindu, there is this concept of Kundalini. Kundalini is this thing that comes in 2.5 coils. That's how they talk about it. But Kundalini is this energy, and what it does is it heals the soul. It is an energy that connects all of these dimensional bodies together so that your consciousness can experience all of them at the same time. This was your original state. This is your original state of being. It talks in the Word of Now of bringing the being you were meant to be forth, of bringing the spiritual being that you are inside, of bringing that being forth. This is where it starts, because what it's actually talking about is healing your soul. It's actually talking about manifesting the whole being that you were meant to be, so you can exist on all of the planes of existence. Now, the problem is that this Kundalini energy is referred to as the snake. And for this we go to the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, it is the snake that is made tempter and plays the role of the devil. That is a twist of the truth to prevent you from looking at other truths because it scares you. The devil is the tempter. The snake is a victim just like you. What happened is when Adam and Eve, symbolically of course, ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they were exposed to evil. Evil exposed itself to them, and they, for the first time in their life, felt truly negative emotions, and like guilt and shame, which is why they covered themselves, not because they had sex, okay, because they were ashamed and embarrassed. They had committed an act of evil, and they had been tempted and fell through. When this happened, the Kundalini, which was holding their soul together, the snake, retreated. It abandoned them. It left them. And because in doing so, it received an injury of sorts. When this happened, Adam and Eve means they were no longer able to be in all planes of existence at all times. They had lost their connection to the information and the awareness that comes from those other dimensions. And that was the injury that mankind received to their soul. That is what you're trying to heal in order to manifest your being. So that is why it's so important that the snake symbology is used in that way, and that you need to understand that. I'll give you another example. There's another place in the Bible where it talks about Moses lifting the brass serpent and showing the people about how to do it and what it's all about. Of course, the black serpent, the brass serpent is a symbol for Kundalini. Now, they do have actually a very, I guess, kind of an evil form of this somewhere. I've heard about it. Don't really care. But now Moses was a pharaoh, kind of. He was taught everything he would have learned. He would have learned like the pharaohs. He would have done what they did, the rituals they did, the knowledge they had. And you see on that pharaoh sarcophagus, the snake that comes up. That's Kundalini again. That's knowledge that Moses would have had, that his people would not have had at the time. And so you have to ask yourself, why were his people allowed to be in bondage for such a long period of time? Why did it have to happen that way? And why was Moses the only one that could stand the presence of the burning bush? Because Moses could raise the brass serpent, he could stand to be in the presence of God. And so, knowledge that had been twisted by Egypt and perverted had now been laid to the hands of a righteous being, Moses, who I believe was one of the very first prophets to prophesy of the Messiah and the light and the way. Very important. And so, here's an example that they missed. They didn't remove from the text. And an example of how they twisted the text to make you afraid of the other possibility. Now, Hindu is the oldest religion, the oldest viable religion in the world. It has respect for divine feminine, and it has a trinity. Not a trinity. The role that the trinity plays is different. And yes, they have many gods in Hindu, and you should only worship one, right? But if you take the Christianity, and you take archangels, angels, cherubim, and you take demigods, gods and lower gods, and superimpose them, there's some similarity there that might be worth some investigation. Of course, this is my truth. You figure out your truth. Now, yeah. Under these circumstances, what we have here is we have the ability to take this truth and put them together. Dust off all the crap that people added. The Hindu religion it had a renaissance where it produced several different variations based on who was getting the information. But they never had a Nicene Council to collect it and consolidate it. So it's a vast amount of literature. And some of it believe this way, and some of it believe that way. Of course, in a lot of cases, it's one piece that person received, and another piece this person received, and of course it's truth you need to put together. If you would like to research that on your own, go ahead. I really haven't had a lot of time as of late to put a whole thing together for you. So it's going to be kind of up to you if you think that might be true. Look into it. Now, that is hopefully the end of anything I have to say about bad about the Bible. Okay, or maybe a small reference here and there. And the Hindu religion is up for you to study. And there are other truths that have landed other places that become very important. For example, the Qi of China and the Eastern medicines and your prime meridians and several other different belief systems. Now, of course, it was kind of like when God broke the truth up, little pieces landed everywhere. There's truth all over the place. It's like a truth explosion, and the different places have little different pieces. You have these big chunks which went here and became major religions, and you have these little chunks which hold some truth, but not as much as the big blocks. And so there's a process here where you have to go in search of the truth and take it to heart. And so I think at this point I'm done with that. Now I have to kind of do the same thing to science that I did to religion, so that those people who are closed-minded because of it can open their mind. But I'll save that for later. Thank you. I would like to start to talk about my experiences since receiving the fire. I need to talk about it. I need to share it. In order to explain what it is I'm about to tell you, I need to explain to you kind of how the fire works as far as a truth source goes. There's actually more than one fire. If you read the Word of Now, you'll understand that. But one of the fires is like a database, the compendium of all truth. But it's like this. The space shuttle has 2,000 moving parts and pieces. You ask any one person on the street to tell you, or Google, or just to Google anything about it, and they really won't be able to. And the reason is because they don't even know where to start. You don't know the names of it. You don't know the pieces. You don't know what it does. You don't know anything really. And this database is very much like that. If you don't ask the right question, you don't get the right answer. And so you actually have to know what the question is in order to ask the right question and get the right answer, which is why the ability to look inside becomes so important. There is another fire, which is kind of the accumulated knowledge of everything that has ever happened on the planet, the accumulated knowledge of the experience of every being that has ever mastered anything is there. And that's like a database in itself. And then there is that fire has personality. Now, when I received the fire, as I think I've stated in an earlier video, there's a question in the Word of Now that you have to look inside in order to get the question. The Word of Now actually gives you the question, but it's not blatant. It's not right in front of your face. I'm not going to share that with you yet because I want you to have that opportunity to find that yourself, as I explained earlier. But the first thing that I experienced was the quarter-sized tingle between my shoulder blades. As it would turn out, that is a fire. Now, after it went away after 4 days, a while went by, and I'm watching Neil deGrasse Tyson's The Cosmos. I get this tingle right here on the side of my face. I get the knowing to start doing that breathing and move my hands, like I said before. And I have my first experience was standing in the fire. And I've had since I was very young. I was like 17. She's very young to me now. And it was powerful. It wasn't an equal to the experiences I had when I was 17. It's missing some things. Now, about 3 months go by, and I'm waiting for something like that to happen again. It doesn't happen. I get tired waiting. And so I figure out how to force it. I figure out how to create a little bit of spiritual pressure to kickstart it and get it going. I induce it myself. Something I actually had the ability to do the whole time. I just didn't have faith in myself to do it. I didn't believe in me. But I have this experience. But this experience is missing something. And it's missing something again. It's missing even more. And about 3 weeks later, I induce it again. And that one's missing something. It's got something added, but it's still missing something. And every time I do this, another piece is taken away. Until one day, I wake up with Kundalini. I just wake up. I have these little electrical pulses on my spine, up the sides. And they go all the way up the back of my head to up my neck, and the back of my head, and to the crown of my head, and it stops. And it's mild right now. It can get pretty intense. It's just there. I just wake up. I had had some exposure to it. I knew what it was, but I didn't know a lot about it because I wasn't looking for it and I wasn't expecting it. So I kind of had to Google. Now, this is right this. After laying there for a little bit, I move and it diminishes. It goes down to just, it almost disappears. So I lay perfectly still and it starts to build. It starts to build. It starts to build. Well, I get all excited. I can't hold it in. I get up and I move around and it's gone. I got to tell somebody though. I made a mistake actually that I would learn from. What I should have done was laid there and experimented and learned as much as I could about it while it was there. And I didn't. Now, about 4 days later, I wake up with Chi.